You ever have one of those brilliant ideas for a business? One of those light bulb moments where you're just totally convinced you found the next big thing. For decades, the path forward seemed pretty clear. Write a perfect business plan, raise a bunch of money, build your product in secret, and then bam, launch it to the world. But what if that entire model is completely backward? Today, we're diving into the lean startup, a methodology that didn't just tweak the rules, it completely rewrote the playbook for how to build something new.
Ah, yes, this is the classic line, right? It's the siren song of entrepreneurship. It's the belief that if your vision is just brilliant enough and you work hard enough, success is pretty much guaranteed. It's an incredibly powerful and appealing idea.
And that is the single most terrifying question for any founder. It's the one that the old way of doing things almost completely ignores. I mean, what good is launching on time and on budget if you've just perfectly executed a plan to build something nobody cares about? This is the great tragedy of so many failed startups. All that passion, all that money, all that effort poured into a product that just lands with a thud. This colossal waste is the exact problem the lean startup was created to solve. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by tearing down the myth of genius. Then we'll introduce the new methodology it inspired. After that, we'll get into the real engine of the system, the build, measure, learn loop, and its number one tool, the minimum viable product. From there, we'll talk about the toughest decision any startup has to make, to pivot or persevere. And finally, we'll see how it all comes together to stop wasting the most valuable resource of all, people's time. Okay, first things first. Before we can even talk about the new way of building things, we have to tear down the old myths. And that starts with this story we all know about how great companies are supposed to be born. You see, this whole genius story, it's a really convenient excuse, right? When a startup fails, it's easy to just say, oh, well, the founders just didn't have that special visionary quality. The story blames the people, not the process. But the lean startup argues that success isn't about having some kind of special DNA. It's about having a better process. It's not about having the right stuff. It's about having the right method. So, if the old way is broken, where do we find a new one? Well, the answer, funnily enough, comes from a place you probably wouldn't expect, the factory floor. Now, this definition from Eric Ries is super important. Notice what it doesn't say. It says nothing about company size or being in a garage or what industry you're in. The key phrase is extreme uncertainty. When you don't know who your customer is or what your product should even be, a traditional plan is kind of useless. A plan is great when you know where you're going. A startup doesn't yet. So the whole idea is actually borrowed from the lean manufacturing revolution that Toyota pioneered. They used principles like shrinking the size of their work batches and speeding up their production cycles to get waste out of the system. The lean startup brilliantly adapts those same ideas, not for building cars, but for building businesses. Okay, so at the absolute core of this whole thing, at the heart of the system is this simple but super powerful feedback loop. You can think of it like the scientific method, but for entrepreneurs. This is the engine that drives everything. It works like this. You start with your ideas. First, you build a product, or at least a tiny piece of it, as fast as you possibly can. Then you put it in front of real customers, and you measure what they actually do. This gives you cold, hard data. And finally, you learn from that data to make a really tough decision. Do you persevere with your current plan, or do you pivot and try something new? This whole loop is designed to turn your guesses into facts as quickly and as cheaply as possible. So this totally changes how you measure progress. In a lean startup, you don't measure progress by how many features you've built. You measure it by how many times you can get through this build, measure, learn cycle. It's all about speed. Speed through this feedback loop is everything. The team that learns the fastest wins. Simple as that. So how in the world do you build something fast enough to get through that loop quickly? Well, you don't build the whole thing. You build an MVP. Now pay close attention here. An MVP is not just a smaller, crappier version of your final product. Its main purpose isn't to be sold, its purpose is to learn. The question an MVP answers isn't, can we build this product? The real question is, should we build this product? It's a scientific experiment, plain and simple. All right, let's talk about one of the all-time classic examples of a brilliant MVP. It didn't involve any code, no complex tech. It's the story of how Zappos got its start. So instead of building a huge website and a massive warehouse full of shoes, the founder, Nick Swinmurn, ran a super simple experiment. He went to local shoe stores, took pictures of their shoes, and just posted them on a basic website. If someone actually ordered a pair, he'd go back to the store, buy the shoes for full price, and ship them himself. He tested the single biggest, riskiest assumption. Will people actually buy shoes online with almost zero investment? I mean, that's just brilliant.
An MVP doesn't even have to be a real product. Take Dropbox. The team knew their file syncing software was way too complex to demo in some early buggy prototype. So what they do? They just made a video. A simple 3-minute video that showed how the product would work, filled with a bunch of nerdy and jokes for their target audience. And the result? Boom. Their beta waiting list went from 5,000 people to 75,000, literally overnight. They proved people wanted what they had before they were even done building it. Okay, so you've run your MVP experiments. You've gone out and gathered some real data. Now comes maybe the single toughest, most critical meeting a startup can have. You have to decide what to do with what you've learned.
A pivot isn't just throwing up your hands and saying, well, we were wrong. It's a deliberate, strategic change that's based on what you've learned. You keep the overall vision, but you change the strategy for how you're going to get there. And honestly, this is so tough for founders. It means letting go of your original idea, your baby, and having the courage to follow the data, even when it points somewhere you didn't want to go. But how do you know if you really need to pivot? Well, you have to be looking at the right data. Vanity metrics like your total number of signups, they're like candy. They look great and make you feel good, but they can totally lie to you. They don't show cause and effect. Actionable metrics, on the other hand, show you the truth. They track things like, do the customers who signed up in May, after we launched that new feature, act differently than the ones from April? That kind of data shows you if what you're doing is actually working, and that's the only way to make a smart decision.
All right, last big idea, and this one is all about how to actually work more efficiently, but in a way that feels totally backward at first. Okay, imagine you have 100 letters to stuff into envelopes. Your brain tells you the smart way to do it is in big batches, right? Fold all 100 letters first, then stuff all 100 envelopes, then seal all 100. But here's the crazy part. That is actually the slowest way to do it. Large batches hide mistakes, they create huge piles of half-finished work, and they delay feedback until the very end. This is what's known as single-piece flow. Instead of building up a huge pile of features that are just sitting there waiting for feedback, you focus on moving one thing at a time, all the way from in progress to validated. You don't start the next feature until you've truly finished the current one and learn from it. This makes that feedback loop way shorter and helps you spot problems right away, not weeks from now. And this really gets to the soul of the lean startup. The real magic isn't some flash of genius. It's the gritty, sometimes boring work. It's the disciplined, scientific process of turning a vision into a real, sustainable business. It's having the guts to let the data tell you that your favorite idea is wrong, and then having the discipline to go find a better one. So I'll leave you with a challenge. Think about whatever you're working on right now. A business, a project at your job, maybe even a personal goal. What is the one single biggest assumption that your entire success rests on? And more importantly, what's the smallest, fastest, simplest experiment you could run, not next month, but this week, to find out if you're actually on the right track?